tonight by social business entrepreneur Phillip Ullmann. Phillip, how concerned should we be about this looming fiscal financial crisis that we can see in the small print of the Bank of England's reports today?
Enormously concerned. We are in a precarious position. I'm crystal clear about that. The amount of money that is being printed, the level of inflation, they talk about 2.5%. It's much, much higher than that. We all know it's nearer 25%. If you look at what prices have been since the last couple of years, it's gone up by much, much more. And people are suffering. People at home can't put food on the table. And not only they get inflation, which means that they can't put food on the table, the punishment they get is then an increase in interest rates, which then even more penalises the people that can't put food on the table. So we have to, I think, understand what is the real problem. And we are approaching a crisis point. I'm convinced the amount of money that is being printed by the banks, this is the heart of the problem, Matt. We are literally printing truckloads of money, not QE. I'm talking about the actual banks, the commercial banks lend money into existence. That is why we have enormous problems. If we continue to print the huge amount of money that we are, inflation will continue. Inflation means that food can't be afforded, but also we think house price increases is actually good. It's actually not. It's because of all the money that's being printed. It actually means the money is less. So all of this together is causing immense suffering, and there's going to be an impending collapse. So we have to find a solution, and the solution is not interest rate hikes. The solution is actually going to the core problem, which is actually the banking system, which is literally printing money. The commercial banks print money. If we can deal with that and stop the money being printed, we could actually go solve the problem.
Now, I notice Reform MP Rupert Lowe is one of the people who's made this argument that we need to dramatically slash the amount of money that's being printed. We need to push back against QE and so on. So why isn't Rachel Reeves talking about it?
Because the Treasury aren't explaining it to her. And I think GBNews has got a real opportunity to, Rupert is starting to talk about this issue, to explain to people that banks create money. It's not just the government. And once people realise that, they know the system is rigged. They know that they can't put food on the table. They know that the interest rates have increased. They've done nothing to deserve a hike in interest rates on their mortgage. They know they're suffering, and no one's telling the truth that the banks literally create the money. And that is obscene. And that, until we deal with that and start to explain to people, we've got to stop this relentless printing of money. And Rupert has raised it. I mean, the bill didn't go beyond the second reading, did it? But, but at least he's raised an issue. And it's a big issue. And the Treasury aren't listening.
So you're talking about collapse. You're you're using words that will alarm people. I think collapse, crisis. When is this going to happen? What's it going to look like? If we don't get our arms around this issue, printing too much money, getting control of the banks, I mean, what are we talking about here?
We're talking about failure of fiat currencies. This is a worldwide crisis. We see what's happening in America with the tariffs. That's going to cause even more inflation. The market's almost collapsed recently because of the yields. We're very close to a collapse. And I think this time, it won't be 2008, it'll be much worse because internationally, the amount of money that's been created is out of control. The casino banking is crazy. I think we're talking about systemic collapse of fiat currencies, which means that all the currencies which are linked to each other, I think, are going to go. It's not happened before, much, much worse than 2008.
And what does that mean for the average person watching this show if that were to happen? If this prophecy, gloomy prophecy were to happen and it was to be even worse than the great financial crash, what does that mean for the average person watching this show?
I think it's good for your viewers, genuinely, because I think what needs to happen is a rethink and explaining to people what's going on. And we get rid of this debt. The debt is unaffordable. We're talking about a jubilee of some sort. So it won't be bad for you, for people. People will recognise that we need to reset and we need to stop this huge amounts of debt and create a system that looks after people. So I think even though there's going to be a period of uncertainty, it will be good for your audience.
One of the things I've never understood, I'm not an economist, but throughout the 2000s and the 2010s, I watched the gradual increase in debt. And I sort of was asking myself the question as we got to 80%, 90%, 95% debt to GDP, well, what on earth happens if the interest rates go up? And of course, as we saw after the COVID pandemic, that's exactly what happened. So why wasn't anybody actually thinking about this before we got to this point?
Because we keep people out of really understanding this. The propaganda, the nonsense, we know that inflation is nothing like what they're telling us. And we keep people quiet. People know, if you ask people, have they got enough money to put food on the table? They say, no, we haven't. Yeah. That's not measured. So the level of unemployment is not measured. So what we're doing now, we're not telling people what's really going on. And that's why we've got social unrest. That's why we've got these issues and the social, because effectively we're not looking after people. And the answer is people are starting to complain. They want change. And therefore, this collapse will be good for people because the system is...
I mean, I was going to say, if you look at the national polling at the moment, it's very clear people want change, and part of that change are MPs who are actually talking about the need to cut back on quantitative easing. So, Phillip, thank you for joining us and explaining this critical issue to our GB News viewers. We will almost certainly continue the conversation in the months to come. Now,